he was number 7.
You know, I don't actually give a I hate everyone. I hate everyone ranked in front of me.
So here's where things started falling apart between two UFC lightweights. What looked like friendly backstage chat turned into one of the nastiest social media wars the sport's ever witnessed. Personal attacks, dead friends getting dragged in, and threats of real violence. The moment when everything went nuclear is coming up next. Look, trash talk has always been part of mixed martial arts. Fighters know this going in. They'll question your heart, promise to knock you out, mess with your head before the fight even happens. Think about Conor McGregor's mind games, Chael Sonnen's wrestling-style rants, all those press conference blow-ups we've seen over the years. But there's still invisible boundaries out there. Lines that separate creative insults from attacks that cut way deeper than any punch or kick ever could. January 9th, 2026, around 8:12 a.m. GMT, Dan Hooker decided he'd heard enough from Paddy Pimblett. What he did next crossed a line that shocked even veteran MMA observers. Hooker went on X, posted this video from their backstage meeting at UFC Qatar back in November. Remember, this was footage that had gone viral for showing mutual respect between two competitors. But Hooker's caption changed everything completely. Those last two words hit different. R.I.P. Ricky, with dove and tombstone emojis. Hooker was talking about Ricky Turvin, Paddy's close friend who took his own life on July 21st, 2022. Same friend whose death Paddy had revealed in that emotional post-fight interview. The friend whose memory inspired Paddy's mental health advocacy work. When someone loses a friend to suicide, that trauma runs deep. It affects whole communities, not just family members. For Paddy, who'd been open about how devastating Ricky's death was, seeing his friend's name used in social media beef had to sting in ways that go beyond normal fighter trash talk. This wasn't just another insult about fighting skills or character flaws. This was bringing up grief, loss, all the work Paddy had done turning tragedy into something positive. Hooker's post blew up fast. 6,500 likes, 212 shares, 294 replies, 1.7 million views. The MMA world was locked in, already picking sides about who went too far first. But Hooker wasn't done yet. 17 minutes later, 8:29 a.m. GMT, another post dropped. This time, more direct. On site means exactly what you think it means. No talking when we meet. No negotiation, just hands immediately. This wasn't promotional theater anymore. This was a straight-up threat of real-world violence outside the sport's boundaries. The second post went even bigger. 18,000 likes, 3076 shares, 4033 replies, 1.3 million views. What started as social media drama had escalated into promises of actual street confrontation. For hours, Paddy stayed quiet, while the entire MMA community went to war in comment sections. Social media timelines turned into battlegrounds, fans defending their fighter while attacking the other guy, arguments stretching hundreds of comments deep, filled with anger and accusations. Some people said bringing up a friend who died by suicide, especially considering Paddy's charity work and advocacy since then, was the lowest blow possible. They pointed to everything Paddy had done for mental health awareness, the money he'd raised, conversations he'd started about male suicide prevention. Using that tragedy for social media beef showed a level of callousness that went way beyond normal fighter insults. Finally, 3:02 p.m. GMT, Paddy broke his silence. His response accepted Hooker's challenge while calling out his tactics at the same time. Paddy managed to accomplish several things in one post. He brought up Hooker's previous comments about hating fighters ranked above him, turning their old friendly conversation into ammunition. Paddy held the number 5 ranking, while Hooker had dropped to around 8 or 9 after his submission loss to Zarukian. He tried to frame his original comment as just a hypothetical joke about grappling, which most people thought was downplaying how offensive it really was. Most importantly, he directly called out Hooker for mentioning his dead friend, called it the lowest of the low. Paddy's response got about 3,100 likes, 73 shares, 34.6 replies, 409,000 views. After that final shot, both fighters went quiet. No more posts as the evening rolled on, leaving everyone to process what they'd just witnessed. The timing made this whole situation even more complicated. Paddy was just 15 days away from the biggest fight of his career. Interim UFC lightweight title fight against Justin Gaethje at UFC 34 on January 24, 2026. His first real shot at championship gold. Hooker had his own fight coming up against Benoit Saint-Denis at UFC 35 on January 31st. Both guys had major professional commitments right around the corner, but neither one wanted to back down from this personal war. Now let me paint the full picture of how we got here. In the unforgiving world of mixed martial arts, where people regularly beat each other unconscious for entertainment, there's still an unwritten code. Invisible boundaries that even the most savage competitors understand shouldn't be crossed. These boundaries aren't talked about openly, but every fighter knows they exist. January 9, 2026. Two of the UFC's most compelling lightweights didn't just cross that line, they completely destroyed it. Left nothing but burned earth and the remains of what many thought was genuine friendship built through shared competition. The Paddy Pimblett and Dan Hooker social media explosion represents one of the most dramatic and personal feuds in recent UFC history. A confrontation involving dead friends, mothers, verbal warfare that makes regular trash talk look like polite conversation. Paddy, the Baddy Pimblett, stands as one of the most polarizing figures in modern MMA. Born January 3, 1995 in Liverpool, England, this charismatic Scouser has built an empire on undeniable fighting ability, infectious personality, and willingness to speak his mind regardless of consequences. At 31 years old, Paddy's compiled an impressive 23 wins against only 3 losses. His submission skills account for 10 victories. Improving striking adds another 7 knockouts. But more impressive than these numbers is his perfect 7-0 UFC record that launched him from regional circuit favorite to one of the most talked about fighters on the planet. His journey to UFC stardom began years before his 2021 promotional debut, stretching back through European MMA development. As former Cage Warriors featherweight champion, Paddy dominated the European scene with technical grappling and supernatural ability to create excitement wherever he competed. His UFC debut against Luigi Vendramini ended spectacularly with a TKO finish that earned performance bonuses and announced to the MMA world that a new star had arrived. Wins over Jordan Leavitt, Jared Gordon, Tony Ferguson, Bobby Green, and most significantly Michael Chandler in 2025, a knockout representing his most impressive achievement, established Paddy as a legitimate lightweight division force. But Paddy's story goes way beyond wins and losses. July 2022, following his submission victory over Jordan Leavitt at UFC London, Paddy revealed to the world that he'd learned of his close friend Ricky's suicide just hours before weigh-ins. In one of the most emotionally charged post-fight interviews in UFC history, tears streaming down his face, voice breaking with grief, Paddy used his platform for an impassioned plea about men's mental health awareness. He said there's a stigma that men can't talk about feelings, urged anyone contemplating such devastating decisions to please speak to someone, anyone, about their struggles. The weight Paddy carried into that fight was almost incomprehensible. Here's a man who learned his best friend died just hours before making weight for a professional fight, somehow compartmentalized that devastating grief long enough to step in the octagon and secure a submission victory, then chose to use his moment of triumph, advocating for others suffering in silence. The authenticity of his emotion was undeniable. This wasn't promotional theater, but genuine human vulnerability displayed before millions of viewers. That moment transcended sport entirely, transforming Paddy from talented fighter into genuine mental health advocate. His subsequent work includes funding charities like James's Place in Liverpool, organizations dedicated to providing professional support to men experiencing suicidal crisis. He's spoken repeatedly about breaking down barriers, preventing men from seeking help, about toxic masculinity, convincing men to suffer in silence, about his determination to honor Ricky's memory by preventing others from making that same tragic choice. On the other side stands Dan the Hangman Hooker, 35-year-old New Zealand veteran whose UFC journey reads like a testament to human resilience and unrelenting will to compete at the highest level, despite setbacks that would break lesser competitors. Born February 13, 1990, in Auckland, Hooker brings massive experience to every engagement, professional record of 24 wins against 13 losses throughout his lengthy career, standing 6 feet tall with 75-inch reach that allows him to control distance and pick apart opponents from range. Hooker's kickboxing background, he claimed King in the Ring middleweight championship before transitioning to MMA, makes him a formidable striker who shared the octagon with virtually every significant lightweight contender of the modern era. His UFC career, spanning over a decade since 2014, represents the quintessential warrior's journey. While his roughly 14-9 UFC record doesn't sparkle with undefeated luster like Paddy's pristine run, the quality of opposition tells a more compelling story. His legendary 5-round war with Dustin Poirier in 2020 remains one of the greatest lightweight contests ever witnessed. Brutal display of heart and skill that earned both men eternal respect from the MMA community. Though Hooker came up short, the performance showed his willingness to stand and trade with division elite, absorbing devastating punishment while continuing to fire back with his own combinations. Split decision victories over Paul Felder, a fight of the night classic where both men emptied everything over 5 grueling rounds. And Matej Gamrot in 2024 cemented his reputation as someone who refuses to be an easy night for anyone. Training at legendary City Kickboxing in Auckland alongside Israel Adesanya and other elite fighters, Hooker developed striking that combines technical precision with genuine knockout power. His long reach lets him control distance and pick apart opponents from outside, while durability enables him to survive moments when that distance gets breached. But his recent submission loss to Arman Tsarukyan at UFC Qatar, November 2025, exposed ongoing vulnerabilities in grappling defense. Weaknesses that would soon become the subject of cruel mockery from an unexpected source. Before January 2026, these two men appeared nothing short of cordial. Friendly even, if available evidence could be believed. At UFC Qatar, November 2025, where Hooker competed against Arman Tsarukyan, the two fighters crossed paths backstage during weigh-ins. Paddy was in Qatar cornering a teammate, and both lightweights found themselves in proximity during pre-fight festivities. Video footage from that encounter shows them chatting amicably, laughing together, displaying none of the animosity that would soon consume their relationship. Body language was relaxed, conversation appeared genuine, observers watching would have had no reason to suspect these men harbored any ill will toward each other. The spark that ignited this firestorm came from an interview Paddy gave while defending Justin Gaethje's age. The American was 37 at the time. Paddy drew a comparison to Hooker, stating with characteristic Liverpool bluntness that people were saying Justin Gaethje was old, but he was only 2 years older than Dan Hooker. Then came the comment that ignited everything, a vulgar, crude remark suggesting Dan Hooker's grappling abilities were so terrible that he couldn't even defend his own mother in a hypothetical assault scenario. The exact wording was crude enough to mock Hooker's grappling defense while simultaneously involving his mother in an extreme and offensive manner. Clips spread across social media with wildfire velocity, shared and reshared by accounts, dissected and debated by fans and analysts. For many observers, Paddy's comment represented significant escalation from typical fight promotion banter. Involving an opponent's mother in such a scenario crossed a line many felt should remain sacred. In the immediate aftermath of this explosive confrontation, the UFC remained conspicuously silent. Dana White, typically reliable for commentary on fighter controversies, offered no public statements regarding the Paddy-Hooker feud. This silence could be interpreted several ways. Maybe the UFC viewed this as personal matter between two adult competitors, or perhaps they recognized official commentary might add fuel to an already raging fire. Alternatively, the promotion might have quietly pleased with attention this beef was generating for two fighters with imminent high-profile fights. The contrast between sudden enmity and their cordial November 2025 interaction made the feud more jarring to observers who witnessed their friendly backstage exchange. Hooker's decision to share that footage alongside his initial attack served as pointed commentary on what he perceived as Paddy's two-faced behavior. Friendly in person, but disparaging when speaking to media without Hooker present to respond. Media coverage was extensive, with outlets including MMA Fighting, Low Kick MMA, and others providing detailed breakdowns of the exchange. Most coverage emphasized the shock value while noting its isolated nature. This was a single explosive exchange rather than ongoing rivalry with deep historical roots. The speed their relationship deteriorated from friendly to nuclear was itself the story. MMA community reaction was predictably divided with passionate arguments on both sides. Those siding with Paddy pointed to the sacredness of his friend's memory and inappropriateness of weaponizing suicide for social media engagement. They argued regardless of what Paddy said about Hooker's mother, however crude or offensive, some subjects should remain off-limits. Hooker's invocation of Ricky's death revealed fundamental lack of decency no provocation could excuse. Hooker supporters contended Paddy initiated personal attacks by involving Hooker's mother in such crude offensive hypothetical scenario, and he had no right claiming victim status after making comments designed to humiliate and demean. They argued Paddy's subsequent defense of his comments as merely hypothetical joke demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of why his original statement was so objectionable. Career trajectories of both fighters provide important context for understanding why this conflict erupted with such intensity. Paddy, at 31, with unblemished 7-0 UFC record, represents the lightweight division's future. His trajectory has been impossibly steep, from regional circuit champion to UFC contender to interim title challenger in just a few short years. His knockout victory over Michael Chandler silenced many doubters and established him as a legitimate threat to anyone in the division. Hooker represents something different. The battle-tested veteran whose best days may or may not be behind him. 35 years old, with career record including both brilliant victories and crushing defeats. Hooker occupies challenging middle ground, Bajan contendership, and gatekeeping. His recent loss to Tsarukyan highlighted ongoing grappling defense vulnerabilities, the very vulnerabilities Paddy chose to mock in his original interview. These divergent career arcs may explain some intensity underlying their conflict. Paddy ascending rapidly toward title shot with confidence of a fighter never tasting UFC defeat, perhaps felt emboldened to dismiss a veteran he perceived as fading from relevance. Security of his rankings position, combined with upcoming title opportunity, may have created invincibility sense that manifested in reckless trash talk aimed at someone posing no immediate career threat. Hooker, watching younger fighter leapfrog him in rankings while simultaneously mocking his abilities in most offensive terms imaginable, may have felt particular sting motivating his extreme response. Professional fighting psychology is complex, involving ego, pride, financial pressure, knowledge that every performance could define or destroy a career. For a veteran like Hooker, seeing relative newcomer dismiss decades of work with crude joke about his mother may have triggered something primal, a need to wound as deeply as he'd been wounded, regardless of consequences. No official fight between Paddy and Hooker has been announced, and given their respective scheduled January 2026 bouts, such matchup couldn't materialize until spring, at earliest. However, the on-site challenge issued by Hooker and accepted by Paddy suggests any future encounter between these fighters could potentially escalate beyond verbal conflict. The UFC may eventually seek to capitalize on this bad blood by booking them against each other. Such fight would carry significant promotional weight. Brash young star against respected veteran, mental health advocate against the man who invoked his friend's death. Promotional possibilities are endless, even if ethical implications of profiting from such deeply personal animosity remain troubling. From matchmaking perspective, a Paddy-Hooker fight makes considerable sense beyond narrative elements. Both compete in same division, occupy similar rankings positions, possess styles that could produce entertaining contest. Paddy's grappling prowess against Hooker's striking would create classic stylistic clash, while both men's willingness to engage and histories of producing exciting fights suggest matchup delivering entertainment value, regardless of personal animosity underlying it. The UFC has demonstrated repeatedly that it views genuine fighter animosity as promotional asset rather than problem to manage. Most successful pay-per-views often feature fighters who genuinely despise each other, whose desire to inflict damage extends beyond professional obligation into personal vendetta. A Paddy-Hooker fight would fit perfectly into this promotional model, offering authentic bad blood that cannot be manufactured through press conference theatrics alone. However, the promotion must also consider potential downsides of such booking. On-site threats exchanged between both fighters raised legitimate concerns about what might happen at press conferences, weigh-ins, other promotional events leading up to potential fight. While controlled confrontations can generate buzz and sell tickets, genuinely hostile encounters can damage promotion's reputation and create legal liabilities. The line between promotional theater and genuine danger can be difficult to identify, and UFC would need to carefully manage any future interactions between these two combatants. For now, both fighters must focus on immediate challenges. Paddy must channel whatever emotions this conflict stirred into his preparation for Justin Gaethje, a fight that could establish him as legitimate champion or expose him as elevated beyond his actual skill level. Hooker must similarly compartmentalize his anger while preparing for Benoit Saint-Denis, a fight that could reignite his title ambitions or continue his slide toward veteran gatekeeper status. The MMA community will watch both fights with heightened interest, analyzing not just technical performances but also psychological states of both combatants. Will this conflict provide Paddy with extra motivation, additional chip on his shoulder fueling career best performance against Gaethje, or will it distract him from preparations, introducing emotional turbulence into camp that should have been focused entirely on interim title? Did Hooker's aggressive response suggest fighter who lost emotional control, allowing anger to override judgment in ways that might carry over into his performance? Or did it reveal warrior who refuses to be disrespected, channeling frustration into focused aggression? These questions will find answers in the octagon, where truth of fighter's character ultimately reveals itself through action rather than words. The cage has a way of stripping away pretense, exposing both strengths and weaknesses that words can obscure. Both Paddy and Hooker will face opponents capable of testing every aspect of their preparation, skill, and mental fortitude. But regardless of how their upcoming fights unfold, events of January 9, 2026 have permanently altered the relationship between Paddy Pimblett and Dan Hooker. What was once cordial is now hostile. What was once friendly is now bitter enmity, and invocation of dead friends' memory has ensured this conflict will carry wounds that may never fully heal. In the brutal world of professional fighting, where physical violence is currency of success, it's perhaps ironic that deepest cuts often come from words rather than fists. Paddy's crude hypothetical about Hooker's mother was undeniably offensive, gratuitous insults serving no purpose beyond provocation. But Hooker's decision to respond by invoking R.I.P. Ricky, weaponizing friend's suicide for social media clout, represented a different category of transgression entirely. Whether the MMA world has witnessed beginning of prolonged rivalry or merely single explosive incident remains to be seen. Some fighter beefs burn hot briefly before cooling into mutual indifference. Others simmer for years before being resolved through cage competition. The Paddy-Hooker conflict could follow either trajectory, depending on factors neither fighter fully controls. Whether UFC chooses to book them against each other, whether they cross paths at future events, and whether time allows for any healing of wounds inflicted on that fateful January day.